This is April 15th edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source and the agricultural industry in Central Illinois and across the Midwest. I'm your host, Cesar Delgado. We're glad you're here. We were visiting with Brad Basing from Advanced Trading in Bloomington, Illinois. We were talking about this commodity markets. I probably asked him about the weather models for next following weekend for this planting season. This week that we're in the fire circle for severe weather in central Illinois. We are in under the gun on tomorrow night. Please be aware of this weather conditions in Illinois. I will be in Champaign on Wednesday to meet with Dr. Temple Grandin in Champaign at the University of Illinois. This is your agricultural news on Back Roads of Illinois. The Department of Agriculture just confirmed with HPI in the dairy herd in South Dakota and North Carolina. But still, pastured milk is safe to drink. It has remained low. The officials say that you can check your local health department or your health professionals. Senator Durbin of Illinois and Senator John Thune of South Dakota. Both of them were urgent to the president. Joe Biden signed on E15 year-round for the farmers and ethanol industry in the Midwest, alongside with the EP rejected from biofuel industry to the EV. Jeff Cooper from Renewable Fuel Association. He issued with lawsuit against the EP. The planting season kick off with the tractor in the field. But farmers are waiting for rain in the Midwest alongside with cold temperature for this weekend coming up. This is your agricultural news for this morning on Back Roads of Illinois. We were coming Illinois. Welcome to the show. How are you, Brian?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Cesar?
We'll see it. Let's start with our conversation on the corn production and the acreage report from the Department of Agriculture. What is going through the spending time together until June 30th? What are you looking for on the report on June?
The USDA told us with their survey, it was taken the first 2 weeks of March. I'd remind your listeners that that was report again taken probably at, could argue at the peak of the bearish consensus or bearish bias for the corn market. Corn had dipped below $4 a bushel in old crop, for example. So perhaps that may have impacted perceptions a little bit, but regardless, that survey was taken the first 2 weeks in March, and it did forecast a decline in corn acreage here planted for 23, or beg your pardon, for 24, down to 90 point, just over 90 million acres. 90 point, yeah, just a fraction over 90 million acres. In comparison, last year, we planted 94.6 million acres. So that's a decline of, let's see here, about 5% from last year. If the weather were good for planting, that is not too wet and not too dry for that matter, but if the weather is good for planting the next 30 days or so into mid-May, perhaps a bit beyond that, I think there's a potential for that number to increase slightly from what it was in March. Producers like to plant corn. The rebound, albeit modest in the market, perhaps would encourage a few more acres planted compared to what those expectations might have been in the first half of March when that survey was taken. For example, the first half of March, December corn futures were trading uh, under 460 a bushel. Now they're trading closer to 470, 475 a bushel. Not a great increase, but at least a modest recovery. So I think on the corn side, I would think that there's the potential for a little bit of a higher number compared to what it was in March. For soybeans, um, we did see an increase in soybean acreage forecast for 2024 compared to what it was in 2023. USDA is 86.5 million acres. That compares to 83.6 last year. Again, 86.5 this year compared to 83.6 last year. That's an increase of about 3.5% nationwide. A little bit, maybe slightly lower than some expectations um, from the market, but about not extraordinarily out of line with what expectations were going into the report. Looking ahead, I think that B number is maybe a little bit harder to grasp in terms of June, as you commented earlier, than corn. But I think that that number also, if good planting conditions persist from now through early June, for example, and you could extend that all the way into early July, of course, when you get into double crop soybean planting. But regardless, I think that that number also has a chance to edge up into the June report. That June report, I'd remind your viewers, that your listeners, beg your pardon, that we're looking at that June report being based off of surveys the first 2 weeks of June. So that will be taken, excuse me, when most of the planting, particularly for corn, is complete, and the majority of the planting for beans will be completed, hopefully, by those first 2 weeks in June. So that should be a pretty accurate report. So to summarize, I think that the June report, um, weather permitting, has a potential to increase acreage a bit from what we saw in March.
I believe that it was 91 million bushel per acre in the corn complex. I recall correctly, Brian.
Are you looking at acreage at that point? The acreage, and
How do
that,
you see the prices on the corn market for next following week?
I think we're looking at a focus for the short term on the South American weather, and two parts to that, or I should say South American production. The first part is that they are harvesting the corn in Argentina at the moment, and Argentina has been dealing with, it's called corn stunt disease. It's caused by a bacteria. It's a bacterial disease that's spread by leafhoppers, and that is lowering the yields for Argentina compared to initial expectations. Um, I believe there's a private estimate that came out last week that's at 49.5 million tons. The USDA, excuse me, is historically more conservative than that. The USDA did lower its estimate of Argentina corn production by 1 million tons last week, but it's still at 55. Most in the industry think that that number is too high. So what we'll be watching as harvest proceeds here, excuse me, in Argentina, is to see how much further these yields can decline from expectations. Now, I'd remind your listeners that 1 year ago, Argentina only produced 36 million tons of corn. So this year's crop is still going to be larger than last year that was impacted by drought, but it's down from earlier expectations. Some earlier expectations, for example, in Argentina, were up at 57 million tons. So that's the first variable the market's going to be watching. What are the final yields in Argentina? The other one that they'll be watching closely is Brazil. As you know, the second crop corn production in Brazil is going through pollination this month and will continue into pollination probably through the first half of May. They've gotten some good rain on that corn in the northern part of Brazil. which is about 2/3 of the corn, the second crop corn production in Brazil. That has received some pretty good rain. Now, the dry season will start here in all of northern Brazil and in all double crop areas, probably historically around the 1st of May. So whatever moisture they get now is a benefit to their crop because it will dry out soon. The area of concern probably in Brazil at the moment is further south, with about 1/3 of the crop in the states of Mato Grosso do Sul and Paraná is about uh, 1/3 of the crop. It's dry or drier than it is up in the largest producing state of Mato Grosso in the north. So there'll be two parts again. We'll watch market wise. It'll impact prices. Number one, will the rainfall continue to be seen? And most forecasts are saying this week it is going to rain, and I think that's what's part of the pressure in the corn market today. And the second part will be to watch the harvest results from Argentina. And that's going to be a slow process. Historically, Argentina does not harvest corn fast, but they'll harvest all the way into June and perhaps into July in some cases. But regardless, it has started. Harvest has started. I think they're about 15% done with harvest, but it's very slow compared to the U.S., for example. So I think those two factors will be the main ones. We'll also be watching any additional, obviously, planting progress here in the U.S. Crop progress report will come out this afternoon, 3 o'clock. Most are looking for about 6 to 7% maybe on corn nationwide. That's pretty close to the 5-year average, maybe a bit above the 5-year average. But obviously, as you get further into April here, the weather becomes very important. And as you know, corn yields can be very sensitive to planting progress. So for the moment, I don't see any great support from that. Final thought on that, though, is we do get a longer range outlook for the month of May from the National Weather Service on Thursday morning this week. So the market will take a look at that in terms of what the moisture will look like during planting time here in May.
I see that on Friday morning on the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report from Brazil's corn production.
There is quite a bit of debate about the Brazilian crop at the moment. USDA, as you said in their Friday supply demand report, left its forecast unchanged for March. It's at 124 million tons. That's down from last year. It was a record 137 million tons, but it's still a large crop. However, CONAB, which is roughly Brazil's equivalent of the USDA, came out the same morning on Thursday, and said the crop is only 111 million tons. So that's a difference of 13 million tons or over 500 million bushels between the two. So that's the big debate at the moment. Apparently, the market for the moment is siding with USDA in terms of the potential for that 124 estimate. It's something that's evolving day to day now. I'd remind your listeners because of the fact that corn is in pollination in Brazil and will continue to be in pollination for the next 30 days beyond a little bit beyond that second or third week of May. Regardless, those numbers, that discrepancy between those numbers, that divergence, if you will, is historically wide. There can be years where it's a 3 to 5 million ton difference, but not 13. So the market will be watching to see which of those is closer to being correct, and that's just going to take some time to figure out what the acreage total was that was planted, and then of course what the yields are.
Brian, what are you looking for the weather models in central Illinois near Bloomington and Peoria? Champaign include north central Illinois.
Cesar, most models are calling for rain this week. Um, I would say the heaviest rain is across the river, if you will, into Iowa and Minnesota. Nevertheless, there is going to be pretty good chance of rain here in Illinois. It looks like at the moment the heaviest rain is going to be north and west of the Illinois River in that region. As you go further south of the river and east of the river, as you mentioned, Bloomington, Normal, Champaign, amounts are less. I would say some forecasts are saying maybe a half inch to an inch, whereas you go north and west of the Illinois River, maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch up in that area. So it's going to be wet this week, and in contrast to the drying trend we've seen the last several days. And of course, some very high temperatures, 80-degree temperatures here on Sunday, and I believe here on Monday it's supposed to also be close to 80 degrees. So I imagine some planters will be rolling today, but weather-wise, they may be um, put on the sidelines here for a few days anyway. I also hear that the temperatures are going to get cooler this week. However, it's not supposed to be a sustained trend. Maybe closer to a little bit below normal temperatures into this coming weekend.
Do you have any final thoughts about these commodity markets?
The final thought that I would share, Caesar, is that when we look at the March grain stocks report that came out on March 31st, it was released the same day, excuse me, as the prospective plantings report. That report confirmed, the grain stocks report confirmed what we had heard quite a bit during the first half of this crop year, and that is that the amount of old crop corn that was harvested from the 2023 harvest, is still being held by producers. In fact, it's a significantly larger than normal percentage of that corn is being held on farm, for example. Beans maybe a bit more than average too. So our message when looking at that situation is that we encourage producers. In my opinion, it's very important to get control of those old crop bushels because obviously there is no downside protection from crop insurance. As your listeners know, that expired many months ago at the end of October last fall when the harvest price was set. But the market has been trading sideways to lower since harvest of last fall, albeit a modest rebound we're seeing now. So strongly encourage producers to get control. And by that, we mean um, get a floor underneath those old crop bushels. That can be done a couple different ways. Briefly, they could either sell the bushels and purchase a call option. We want to maintain flexibility in case there's a rally here this spring or summer for any number of reasons. They want to be a participant in that, but they want to set a floor, and you can set that floor, of course, when you sell the grain. Alternatively, instead of selling the grain, they can purchase a put option, which gives a floor underneath the market, but also leaves the upside open. So the end goal of that strategy, getting control of old crop, is to be able then to focus entirely on new crop. New crop does have some insurance, crop insurance, but that's not a standalone marketing strategy. There are opportunities, as you know, between the February base crop insurance period and the October harvest price. Markets can move a lot between those two periods. So we strongly encourage producers. In my opinion, it's critical to get a floor underneath old crop bushels, get control of those old crop bushels, and then focus entirely on new crop pricing.
Follow the question. Talk to me. What would happen in the recording lowering prices for corn? What do you recommend for the farmers with these trends?
I think that strategy, a good strategy to consider would be to sell the old crop corn. It's not particularly appealing compared to where it was, for example, last summer or fall, but no one can turn back the clock, and we have to deal with what we were dealing with today. Simultaneously, make that sale of old crop, purchase a call option. I would either go out to the July call option or September. That would give us an entire look at the planting season. For example, and if you go all the way out to the September call option, that would take us through the pollination of the 2024 crop. So if there are any weather scares or weather issues involved with the 2024 crop, those call options would reflect those issues. So again, get control of the old crop by selling it. New crop, there's a variety of strategies to consider. You could consider just a forward sale small percentage of new crop production. You could do a put option purchase. The put option purchase could be done in a variety of ways. It could be done in a classic sense, as it were, with a purchase of a December put option for corn or a November put option for beans, or you could purchase short dated options. Um, those are it takes a little bit more time to explain, but they are valuable tools in the toolbox that a producer can choose from. Those are my suggestions. Another suggestion, perhaps on new crop, would be a hedge derived contract. So I would suggest working with a trusted risk management consultant and work on which of those tools in that toolbox, which of those pricing strategies are most appropriate for your operation.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you for the opportunity, Susan.
This is your agricultural markets update with Brian, basting from Advanced Trading in Bloomington, Illinois. We're back with our last segment on back roads of Illinois. Thanks, Brian, basting from Advanced Trading in Bloomington, Illinois. We're back on back roads of Illinois. I mentioned before I am not available on Wednesday. However, I am not available on tomorrow's program. I will be watching the weather in Central Illinois. We were going to talk with Sam Hudson out of Brimfield, Illinois for Corn Belt on Thursday and on Friday. We were going to have a discussion panel with Ted Ness from Zenner Hedges and Jason Minter with Bloomberg News and Mac Marshall from United Soybeans Board. I encourage you to come see it. This is our show. Thanks to listen on Back Roads of Illinois. See you soon. For Back Roads of Illinois, I'm Cesar Delgado. Have a great week.